Hey everybody, welcome to the UFC 258 preview edition of Cage My IQ. Once again, everybody, this is Cage My IQ. My name is D-Bake, and I got with me Miles Long. How's it going, Miles?
No, doing good. Just getting ready for this.
As you see, we're short a man. Sam is on assignment right now,
Big
but
sad.
he'll be back next week. Did you get any chance to watch any of the fights on Saturday?
No, what was I doing Saturday? Saturday, I was feverishly editing an audio episode, so I did not get a chance. But I heard it was good.
Oh, it was really good. If you look at the ticker on the bottom for the main card, Benir Dariush, Alejandro Pantoja, Clay Guida, Corey Sandhagen, and Alexander Volkov were victorious at UFC Fight Night. I want to focus just real quick before we go into the fight predictions on the co-main event and the main event. Corey Sandhagen viciously beat Frankie Edgar within the first minute by a crazy knee to the face. And he just dropped down like a tree after a lumberjack and just cut it down. That was crazy. It's just crazy how he dictated that fight within 30 seconds. He kept on moving back and forth, giving him to basically pivot to where he wanted to go, and then he shot forward with the knee, caught him in the jaw, and then Edgar just fell down. He was done.
Oof.
And I'm looking for him to get the next shot at that title to whoever wins the Sterling Yan fight. And then in the main event, we had Alexander Volkov knock out Alistair Overeem in the second round. One thing that I saw from that fight was Overeem. He likes to do this. He likes to stand up kind of like a boxer and hold his hands up. And all Volkov did was he kept on getting him in the stomach, getting him in the side, and then he had him at will, punching him through the face. Like the guard didn't even work. Like he would just punch through it and get through. He damaged him to the point where Evereem fell down and then just rolled over and gave up.
Oof.
Yeah, and then they're talking about Volkov being in title contention now. But
good. I like Volkov. He's good. I like that.
Yeah. He looked much improved with this takedown defense as well, which was his Achilles heel against Curtis Blades. So it was nice to see him add that to his repertoire, because if he can stop the takedown, he will be a big contender in that heavyweight division. But they gave the Fighting Night honors. They gave the matchup was Dariush and Ferreira. They had matchup of the night, and then the performance of the night, they gave it to both Sandhagen and Volkov. So, because there wasn't a submission on the main card. I think there's one submission on the whole card itself. So it was nice to see that they split it between them two. But looking forward to this Saturday now, we got the UFC 58. We got our fight predictions. And first off is a middleweight matchup between Julian Marquez and Mikhail Patullo. What are your first impressions of this matchup?
It was kind of hard to find stuff about these guys because they're fairly new. That's the thing. They're both pretty green. Patullo only has 5 fights in the UFC. 2 of those are wins. And Marquez only has 9 career fights, 2 of those in the UFC. So they're both very, very new fighters. They're pretty interesting. You got Patullo with his like kickboxing and probably some jiu-jitsu. And on the other hand, you got Marquez with the Brazilian jiu-jitsu blue belt and some Muay Thai. And we have already seen Marquez, prove he's pretty good when he fought Philip Dawes. Hawes rather. That was a solid fight. Solid introduction into the league. And now he's going up against Patello. Just watching these guys, it seems like between the two of them, Marquez is the heavier striker, like by a lot, by a pretty wide margin. Patello's footwork is a little bit stiff. He has a good amount of forward pressure, but he creates these big noticeable holes in his guard when he goes for these big power punches and any kind of kick. Every time I see him throw a kick, his hands just come right the fuck down every time. He has issues with like recovery, especially when he's overwhelmed with big power strikes, and it can be hard for him to respond. And I think he gasses out a little bit quicker than he should, especially if he's going up against someone like Marquez who can go all 3 rounds and still be fairly active. When he was fighting Phil Hawes, he was basically working the entire time and still finished out with the knockout, even though he was completely dead tired. So in Patello's fights before he entered the UFC, he showed some pretty decent groundwork and submission work, but we really haven't seen any of it in any of his recent fights. He doesn't seem all that comfortable wrestling, but he has good takedown defense and he can work his way out of bad positions when he needs to. And then on the other hand, you got Marquez. He's, like I said, probably the heavier hitter. He's also got a great deal of impact resistance. So he can take a hit and keep going, no problem, which helps because he tends to favor a mid guard. So, the fact that he has a pretty good chin, even though he keeps his hands lower, is what keeps him in the fight. He's got pretty good wrestling and takedown defense. I mean, he held his own against Phil Hawes, so there you go. The other thing I noticed, he seems to have a fair amount of endurance in terms of like how long he can stay operating at a high level, alongside his impact resistance, of course. But he does have some gas tank issues when it comes to having to repeatedly wrestle over and over again on the ground. Although I don't think that's probably going to be a big issue in this fight. So overall, I think, it's pretty straightforward for me. I think this is going to be a KO on Marquez. He's got the bigger striking power. He can maintain his cool even when he's under fire. And Patello doesn't have the impact resistance he has to just stand and trade with that. I'm thinking probably a knockout in the first or second round is how this is going to go. If by some weird mix-up this happens to be like a submission, it can go either way. But again, I'm still leaning towards Marquez because he seems to have more. He has it more together on the ground. And if it goes to decision, I'm still leaning Marquez because, again, Patello has a lack of impact resistance, and when he gets hit, he gets stunned real easy, and then he has some composure issues. So in terms of like adding up on the points, I think there's just more opportunity for Marquez with his striking and his style to really rack it up on the scorecards if it goes to decision. So.
Yeah. So I did some research on this. Just like you said, these guys don't have much experience in the UFC. Both are orthodox strikers. I'll start with that Portoro. He fights out of Hawaii and has made his way to UFC through the Dana White Contender Series, where he knocked out his opponent in the first round, and then got a contract right away. In his debut, he won by knockout, but then in his last 2 fights, he has lost. Whereas Marquez fights out of the Syndicate MMA and hasn't competed in 2 years. He had surgery after his last fight, and then he was supposed to fight in August, but the day before the fight got canceled because of his opponent getting injured. He's very. It's been documented. He's very motivated to get this victory because he's been stagnant in 2 years. Basically, they've had 2 Dana White Contender Series seasons since he's last fought. And that fight that he had, he won it, and then of course he got hurt. The key to me in this matchup, because both strikers, is Marquez has a 30-pound weight advantage. They both are about the same in every category but weight. I think he weighs in at like 205, where he is like 185, something around that range. Like he cuts the weight and then he just gains it back on that fight. So like he cuts it, but he's naturally heavier. I think he's going to be the more motivated fighter, and then he's going to, and then he has this crazy nickname. It's like something missile.
The Cuban Missile Crisis. That's what it was.
Yeah, Cuban Missile Crisis, because of his knockout power. And then I see this going Marquez by knockout in the first round. I think he's going to be really motivated after being out for 2 years. He doesn't want to win or lose very boring because of that, because he's going to be afraid that he'll get cut because he hasn't fought. He's going to want to get this decision and very quickly make it look convincing and then keep his spot so that he can possibly get another fight very soon. But I got this Marquez by knockout in the first round.
Oh, we agree.
Last time I don't think we agreed on that much.
So I forget which card it was, but we disagreed on like 3 or 4 of them. I forget which one it was and who was right, but
yeah,
that happens sometimes.
Yeah, it happens. But moving on to the second card of the 258, we got a middleweight. We got a bantamweight matchup between Pedro Munez and Jimmy Rivera, where they've actually fought before. And in the first matchup, Jimmy Rivera edged him in a very close split decision. Where do you see this go?
So that fight happened 5 years ago, I'm pretty sure.
Yes.
In like 2016 or something. So, I mean, 5 years is a long time. You're definitely not the same fighter you were 5 years ago, especially if you continue fighting, you take new fights, and you learn along the way. So, having said that, you got Pedro Munez. He's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, judo brown belt. He does some KB. Although by the way he fights, you wouldn't really know he has such good grappling credentials. He doesn't really show it that often. He does have good overall movement and evasion. He has decent guard work in his striking, and he puts a lot of forward pressure. He's got good impact resistance, and he maintains his composure when he's being hit, even with the real heavy power punches. He does tend to overcommit with his kicks, and it kind of messes with his footwork at times, especially when he misses. And sometimes he creates holes in his guard when he goes for these big power strikes. Sometimes he overswings or he overcommits, and it kind of throws off his positioning. But he's very strategic about when he uses his wrestling and his ground fighting abilities. He seems to prefer to stand and trade. Like I said, if you didn't know he had that good of grappling credentials, you would never figure it out by the way he tends to fight, because he'll just look for these opportunities, and then all of a sudden he'll slip in there with these nasty submission attempts, and hopefully whoever he's up against can get out in time. On the other hand, you got Jimmy Rivera. He's a 3rd degree black belt in Kyokushin karate. He's got some wrestling background as well. Now he's mostly a decision fighter. He's got good movement, and he can slip into the wrestling range really well when he needs to, which helps him control the fight. He has good impact resistance. He can recover well. Like I said, his wrestling is pretty good. He can problem solve when he's on the ground. And, all that's great. It adds with his style of having lots of endurance, and he keeps his overall movement. He's pretty good about keeping his feet moving and evading a lot. But the problem is he has very little finishing power. And that tends to be the case with a lot of decision fighters. You get them, moving around, and they can hang in with you. But then when it comes to actually getting a knockout or getting a submission, they tend to lack what it takes in order to end the fight. So overall, if it was a knockout, I could kind of see it going either way, but I'm definitely leaning more towards Munez. I see him definitely landing a big power shot and then ending the fight, or, using his strategic grappling to get into like a ground and pound type situation. If this goes to a submission victory, I'm still thinking Munez. He is the stronger grappler in terms of his resume, and he's so quick with those submission attempts. He just slips in there, and sometimes you can get out, sometimes you can't. And if it goes to decision, I would give it to Rivera. Basically, his overall movement and evasion, I think, is going to help him. Help if he ends up going the distance. That's going to be what ends up keeping him from absorbing a ton of punches across the fight, helps him get his punches in. So it just gives him a better strategy for racking up points on the judges' scorecards, because Munez particularly has a tendency to absorb more strikes on average than he lands, in say about a given minute. So overall, I think the most likely situation is probably, I think, a knockout by Munez. It's hard to tell what round though.
Yeah, and did research on this too. Munez is an orthodox striker and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu grappler out American top team and backhouse MMA. In his last 3 fights, he knocked out Garbrandt and lost to Sterling and Edgar.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
he lost to 2 top 5 guys in the weight class. He's going to want to take this to the ground. He hasn't really done that lately, but what his key should be is to take Riviera down and keep him from striking and keep him from getting that movement going. Whereas Jimmy Rivera is an orthodox striker fighting Team Tiger Shulman. He's 1-2 in his last 2 fights. He had a really convincing victory over Cody Stamann, and then he had his 2 losses to Sterling and Jan. So the 2 guys fighting for the title next month is who he lost to. He's going to want
to fight. That was pretty cool.
Yeah,
he got his ass handed to him, but it was a good fight.
I know. He's going to want to stand and trade shots and get started early because he's going to want to wear Munoz down so he doesn't get that ground game going, because that's for me in the first fight they went and they stood toe to toe the whole fight. So I felt like for some reason Munoz decides not to use his strength to his advantage. I feel like every fight he fights to his opponent's fight and not his own game plan, and I feel like that's what gets him. Like it worked for Cody Garbrandt and he knocked him out, but he kind of used his game plan and then knocked him out. Whereas in the past 2 fights, he's been standing and trading, especially in that Edgar fight. I felt like he had every momentum to take that fight over, because technically they said that they thought he should have won it, but it went to the judge's decision, which, when it goes to their decision, anything can happen. Because they might score it a little bit differently than the common person or like one of the commentators. So he lost that narrowly. So I feel like if he can get the ground game going and grapple on the ground or get it against the cage and smother him, he has a very good shot at winning. But if Rivera can control the middle of the octagon, move at his pace, and then get the striking going, it will favor him like it did last time. But for me, I have it as Munoz by decision. I feel like he's going to use the ground game. He's going to keep him on the ground for maybe like half the fight, and then they're going to trade shots. But I feel like he's going to wear Rivera down to the point where his significant strikes are going to be less than Munoz. So I have Munoz by decision. He's going to get the second one, and then who knows if they go for a third fight or if the Munoz just moves up, because he's been kind of stagnant at that 7-8 range. Like if he would have beat Edgar, it would have been Munoz facing Corey Sandhagen, and that would have been an interesting matchup. But because he lost, he's fighting Rivera again, and just like Rivera, he moved up in the top 3, but then he lost to the 2 guys in the title match next month, so he got pushed back. So this is going to be a good fight. It has the potential to be fight of the night. I don't think it will, because I have another one as that, but I'm looking forward to this one.
It's interesting. I haven't seen Pedro Munoz really evolve that much in terms of like his overall strategy. He's gotten better at striking because that's where he spends all of his time. Like I'm trying to remember the last time he won by submission. Because there were some fighters in here with like really impressive, particularly on this card, impressive credentials for grappling, but they seem to not really use it. They want to stand and trade. Let's see, the last time Munoz won by submission was 2017. Okay, so not that long ago, but the overwhelming majority of these, he tends to either go, well, most of them tend to be TKOs, but yeah, I mean, you see mostly his submission work happen in his earlier years before he enters the UFC. Ever since he got in, he's only had like 3 submission victories. Everything else is either a decision or a KO. So I don't know. Maybe he'll think to use that ground game, which, I mean, if he's smart, he probably should. But then again, Rivera's also got some decent wrestling background. He can at least he's good at responding and doing the scrambles and getting back to his feet when he needs to. So I don't know. I'm hoping that Munoz will put that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt experience to work and show us something really cool. But he tends to want to just stand there and trade and knock him out, which I think kind of works against him sometimes. I think he's just a little too fixated on that for whatever reason. It's like a Paulo Costa and Adesanya situation, you know?
Yeah, well, I see it with a lot of fighters where they have their strength and then they try and go in a different direction to improve something else. But that's
Mhm.
something you do in camp. That's something you
Yeah.
work on instead of, oh, let me decide to do it in the fight to throw him off because he's expecting me to do A, and then I go and
Yeah.
do E, and then
Yeah.
why it's a backfire. But yeah, I think he goes back to his roots with this one, just to get going, and then especially early. If he can do it
Mhm.
he's well equipped to win this fight because
Yeah.
he can go 5 rounds. He went five
Mhm.
rounds with Edgar. He just didn't do the wrestling and grappling that as much as he should have.
Mhm.
So this is 3 rounds. He'll be well equipped. He'll last
Yeah.
all 3 rounds, and then if he could get on the ground, that'd be even better. But
Mhm.
moving on to the third fight in this one, we got a middleweight bout again between Calvin Gastelum versus Ian Heinisch.
Heinisch,
Uh,
yeah, I think is how you say that. These names, man.
yeah, this is my potential fight of the night. Fight of the night,
Gonna be a
right
good
here
one.
between these two. This is a very interesting fight. I want to get your take on how you think this is going to go.
Yeah. So this is another good example of like guys who generally have a very impressive grappling background but don't use it. Like particularly with Kevin Gastelum, he's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt and an NCAA wrestler, but all he does is stand and trade. Like you very rarely see that grappling ability. He's definitely a power striker. I think it's because he's got the right build. He's a big dude. He's pretty strong. He's also got great impact resistance. I think we all saw that with the Adesanya fight where they were just trading for 5 rounds. That was great. He tends to be a fast starter and he maintains a good forward pressure in his striking game. So he likes to like sit in the center of the octagon and just pressure everybody towards the edges and have them kind of move around him the whole fight if he can do it. Now he's not great at keeping his legs defended, so I think leg kicks is gonna be a big thing in this fight because if Heinisch can really throw in some powerful leg kicks and wear him down, that shit adds up. As you go for 3 rounds of getting kicked in the leg over and over, especially like calf kicks. Those are pretty grueling on your lower body. He does have good wrestling, like I said, NCAA wrestler, and his takedown is his takedown defense is really good. It's probably about the same as Heinisch's, Heinisch, yeah, Heinisch is also a really good wrestler. But statistically, he seems to get the takedowns when he wants them more often, whereas Heinisch really just doesn't. It's more like holding people up against the cage sort of deal. And even though Kevin Gastelum has that background, has a strong wrestling background, instead of looking for takedowns, he mostly just integrates striking and knees into his clinch work and in wrestling. He'll get people up against the cage and then throw those strikes to the calf or throw knees on the inside of the thighs, that sort of thing. But he very rarely looks for a takedown. And it's funny because when he does get someone to the ground, he has a lot of trouble keeping them there. He'll take someone down and then they just immediately get back up, even if he lands with a really good position. Like he could land in mount and like 3 seconds later, that fucker's back up on his feet. So yeah, it's very strange to see someone with a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt struggle to maintain control like that, unless it's strategic, unless he wants them back up to get back into the striking range. But I mean, his last submission victory was 2014. So he's not very strong when it comes to like finishing on the ground. And then when you got Heinisch, like I said, he's a good wrestler. He's an All-American wrestler. He was a former middleweight champion in one of the amateur leagues he came up from. When you look at the striking stats between Heinisch and Gastelum, they're very, very close. These guys are very similar in terms of strikes thrown per minute, defense, number of strikes absorbed per minute, things like that. But he's also a fast starter. Same sort of approach where he likes a lot of forward pressure. However, he uses more of an in and out kind of game. He'll like shoot in, do a few shots, and then kind of retreat a little bit. But over time, he'll try to like force you to the sides. But again, if someone's not going to just go with that, like for example, Gastelum, he's probably not just going to go, oh, okay, I'll go to the outside of the cage. I think he's going to push Heinisch back quite a bit. And so Heinisch is going to be doing more of an in and out and probably hanging out on the periphery of the ring rather than taking center of the octagon and taking control of the situation like he should. He's got a lot of striking power, especially with his knees and his elbows. Good problem solving on the ground. Although he's never had a submission victory in the UFC, he tends to go for like the ground and pound sort of situation rather than submissions. Yeah, good wrestling up against the cage, but not very good takedown game like at all. It usually doesn't go in his favor whenever he's trying to take someone to the ground. He's usually either just pinning them up against the cage to throw some strikes, or he's trying to get off the cage to get back into striking range. And depending on how hard he goes in round one, gassing out could be an issue for Heinisch. So overall, I think if it goes to a knockout, it could go either way, but I am leaning towards Gastelum. Heinisch tends to kind of be easily goaded into making certain moves by his opponent, and that's kind of a specialty of Gastelum. So he'll use that front hand, he'll do those sort of circular movements to try to draw people in, and I think Heinisch is going to fall for it. Now, the way Heinisch could potentially get a knockout here is, again, the leg kicks. If he does a lot of power leg kicks, kicks to the calf, which that's not normally in his repertoire. You don't see that too often, but if he's been working on that in camp and he utilizes it here, I think, yeah, he can break down Gastelum over the course of 3 rounds. I don't think this is going to be a submission victory. I think it's incredibly unlikely. These guys tend to like to stand and trade, but if it does go that way, I'm leaning towards Gastelum just based on the stats alone. I'm thinking it's probably going to go either knockout or decision. If it goes to decision, I'm leaning towards Gastelum for the same reasons as the KO. I think he's just going to have more control over the fight in general, and he's going to be goading Heinisch into making moves that he really shouldn't make, and then Gastelum's going to make him pay for it. So
I had going into you talking about that. I had one way that I thought this was going to go, and then I just completely switched it up just mid sentence of you talking, because it reminded me of watching something. And then but going into this fight, we got Gastelum. He's a southpaw striker and then wrestler with the BJJ, the purple belt. He fights Kings MMA and Yuma United. In his last 5 fights, Gastelum is 2-3. He's lost 3 straight in a row. To Adesanya, Till, and Hermanson. Yikes. 2 decisions and then 1 knockout against Hermanson. Most notably, the fight against Adesanya, he's been the guy that has other than what's his name in April, he's fighting the Italian guy that we were talking about.
You mean, wait, you're not talking about Jake Paul?
No. no.
It's like, oh God,
no. He's slipping my mind for a second. He's actually fighting Darren Till in April.
Oh, that's right. I don't remember. Yeah, I know.
Yeah. That's slipping my name. But if anybody watching news, it starts with a
Marvin Vittori.
Yeah, Marvin Vittori. Yeah. When Adesanya Vittori, he did the best, but lately in the past couple of years, Gastelum actually got to Adesanya, hit him, had him wobbly, and then wound up losing because he basically gassed out trying to finish Adesanya. But then you got Heinisch, Ian Heinisch. He's the orthodox striker and wrestler as well. He fights out of Factory X Muay Thai and then Genesis MMA. He's 3-2 in his 5-fight UFC career, with his latest win over Gerard Meerschaert. He finished him by TKO, I believe. And then before that, he had 2 straight losses by decision to Derek Brunson and Omari Akhmedov. Both would look to stand up and beat on the other guy. If the fight goes to the ground, I get the big edge to Gastelum because of his jiu-jitsu background. He hasn't finished anybody, like you said, in the UFC, but he has 3 submission victories outside the UFC, and he has a wide range of submissions. Heinisch is sneaky with this. I read that he does these scoff submissions where they're very weird and very complex, but he has like a wide range of knowledge of them, where he likes to get the arm bar in a weird way, and then he has 2 submission victories by that way. I forget what the name is. It's like something scoff submission. I think the first name of it, but
Interesting.
Yeah, but just like him, like his ground game isn't as polished as Gastelum is, but he has a big repertoire of those, being from where he came from. I get the gas tank edge by a big margin to Heinisch. Calvin Gastelum tends to try and finish his opponent way too fast, and then he doesn't get patient, and then he gasses out, and then just loses the fight unless he's very high ahead in the scorecard. I think that's what happened in the Hermanson one. He tried to go after Hermanson, gassed out, and then Hermanson just finished him in the back half of the first round. But the way I see this is, I think Gastelum, who hasn't used his wrestling game at all in these 5 fights that I mentioned, he's tried to stand up and trade shots. I think just like Muniz, I feel like he's going to try and get back to his roots because he has that college wrestling background. He's going to want to use that, get Heinisch down, and then ground and pound him, wear him out because he has a high gas tank. I got this by Gastelum with the second round knockout. Originally I had Heinisch by decision. Mm-hmm. But I was like, I feel like Gastelum's going to want to get back in the good graces of UFC because he's on a 3-fight losing streak. He's going to want to get going again and keep his top 10 status.
Right. I think he tends to. He looks like the between the two fighters, he's probably got more striking power in terms of like striking without having to sacrifice something else, right? Like whether it's his guard or, having to overcommit to these strikes, that sort of thing, where Heinisch, he's a big dude. So just by virtue of being a big dude, he can hit hard. But like, did you see the Brunson fight where like all he had to do was stay calm and he just took Heinisch apart? Mm-hmm. And he wasn't even hitting that hard. It's just it added up. That's what it was. And you could tell towards the end of that fight, he was feeling it. It was really wearing on him, even though those weren't like big, huge power hits. That's the thing that Gastelum can do is he can get those big, huge power hits. But he doesn't sacrifice too much of his guard to do it. And he doesn't really take that much endurance either. It's just over the course of like 3-4 rounds, it adds up, especially if he's really motivated to get a knockout. He'll do these big power strikes and it affects his gas tank. But I think overall, I see this probably more likely in ending in a knockout rather than a decision.
And then in both fighters, we mentioned Brunson, and then he's going to have a tough fight coming up soon with Kevin Holland. That's going to be a really, cool. Really good fight there between them two.
Because Kevin Holland's kind of a weird striker. He's very unorthodox.
Yeah, but that knockout that he just had, where
from the ground,
he came up and then went like this, and then it knocked him out. I was like, geez. And then for some reason, even with that, even before the fight, with how hot he was, they still favored Souza. And I'm like, why would he favor him? I know he has the pedigree, but this guy is hot. He's 20-something. Souza's 40.
Yeah. I called that one. I said Holland was going to win that. I particularly said he strikes from the ground because that's a big thing.
Yeah.
But I think it was just too unorthodox for Souza to really be able to keep up. I think it was like when you do something for so long and you get used to like certain patterns, right? Like generally MMA guys who do like Muay Thai and boxing has a certain look to it because a lot of the patterns are repeated even across different fighters. But Kevin Holland goes in there and it's just like, I'm gonna do whatever because I have a Kung Fu black belt. So
yeah, I'm looking forward to that one. But we're moving on to the co-main event. I'm actually surprised that this was picked as the co-main event with where they're both at. But I think they're doing it because they're trying to get the most out of these two people and see if they can perform on that stage. Yeah. But we got a women's flyweight division matchup with Macy Barber and Alexa Grasso. Macy Barber is actually considered the women's phenom for that division because she's been training since she's been like 10 or 12, and then she's She's been fighting since 19, and then
Mm.
of course she's only lost one fight in her 10-fight career, and then you got Alexa Grasso, who is a completely different matchup style wise,
Yeah.
but who also has that pedigree, not to the status of Barber, but she's also been training since she's fighting since she's been 19. But
Yeah.
where do you see this going?
So this one's a little weird because this is either going to be exactly what everybody expects or this is going to be really sad. Because I didn't know this, but apparently Macy Barber is returning to the ring after recovering from a knee injury. And the thing about knee injuries, man, especially in the fight game, that is a career altering injury. That kind of injury to your knee can completely change the way you fight. Like, who was it? I think it was it Rampage Jackson? But he used to be fairly mobile when he was fresh and new in his career. And then he took like a real nasty shot in the leg. And then now, of course, big lumbering dude. But like, that's what that does to you. Like a knee injury can really just, yeah, it can end a career in terms of like, if you're on a hot streak, all of a sudden you're just seeing a bunch of losses. So it really, that knee injury, I think, is a wild card here. Macy Barber, yeah, you said, she's been training since she was very young. All I could find on her background was karate, but I'm sure she probably did more than like Kyokushin stuff. She's got a lot of power for her size. She's very tenacious. She's got great kicks. She's really good at using those elbows in the clinch or when she's, wrestling people up against the cage. Overall, she got great movement, good evasion, head movement, all that good stuff. She also likes to use a lot of forward pressure in her striking game, especially with her kicks. She likes to keep people at a distance with those big, heavy power kicks so that they're too nervous to move in. She's got decent wrestling, but she doesn't really go for that many takedown attempts. Like you see them every once in a while. But funny enough, all of her UFC victories have been TKOs. So yeah, she's not spending a whole bunch of time on the ground looking for those submissions. When she does go to the ground, she's got good, dominant top pressure ground game. And she favors a ground and pound approach, of course, as opposed to a submission approach. Now, the main thing I'm seeing here is she may have a problem gassing out if she has to stay busy all 3 rounds, particularly because of that knee injury. Like there's long-term effects depending on what happened to that knee. So even when she was fresh, you could tell that if it went 3 rounds and she went to decision, she was tired. She was feeling those 3 rounds, but now what's going on with her leg is a whole other issue. And then you got Alexa Grosso. She's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu purple belt. She's got some boxing background, apparently. She's mostly a decision fighter. In fact, all of her USC victories have been by decision. So she's never actually finished a fight in the UFC by knockout or submission. She's less of a power striker than Barber. If I had to pick between the two, I'd say she has softer punches. But she still has that same good forward pressure in her fighting game. But she does have a tendency to kind of back off more as the fight goes on. So as she fatigues and she gets tired, that forward pressure, we see it less and less and less. It's usually just when she's fresh and, the fight's just beginning. And she can get overwhelmed by her opponents who pressure her. So that's one thing. If there's like 2 forward pressure fighters and Alexa Grosso is one of them, and the other person she's fighting pushes back, she tends to give and go to the outside of the ring instead of maintaining center ring control. She has decent wrestling up against the cage, and she can problem solve while she's on the ground, but she doesn't seem to like to spend too much time there. So final decision, like the way I see this going, of course, a knockout victory, leaning towards Barber, just because, again, she's got more power. She's got more tools. She's very quick, very versatile, and she's got a lot of forward pressure. But, that's assuming that her knee is okay for this fight. And it hasn't just completely altered her game, and she's going to have to get used to that sort of thing. Assuming that doesn't happen, again, if this goes the way everybody expects it to, I think the way everybody expects it to go is knockout by Barber. And of course, I think it's probably, if everything goes normally, a TKO finish in the second round. She's just going to go in and overwhelm Grosso. Submission, I would also say Barber based on stats alone, although she doesn't really do that. So knockout is more likely. Now, decision here, I think, is Grosso's path to victory, right? I can see it either going by knockout for Barber or decision for Grosso. And this would again, this would be if that knee slows her down enough to where Grosso's mobility and that kind of in and out strategy is too much for her to keep up with, especially long term across 3 rounds. So I think, yeah, if that knee is a big enough issue, Grosso will be able to just rack up the points based on the way she fights and her style, and she'll have a better opportunity to kind of control the whole match and end up winning it by a decision.
Yeah, and so when I looked at it, I got Macy Barber. She's a southpaw striker, fighting out of Rufus Sport and Fort Collins Martial Arts. She had 5 straight TKO victories going into her first loss, which was against Roxanne Modafferi. That's the one where she popped her knee in the first minute, stepping on Modafferi's foot. She stepped on her foot, popped it out, and then she didn't feel it until she came out for the second round. She said that the rest of the fight, she basically couldn't fight or fight. She basically just tried to last because of the injury. So that affected her that whole fight, where she thought she had a good chance to win it, and then got the injury, and then that's basically how Modafferi won it. She's going to want to get started early and bounce back and get ahead on the card. That way she can get into her fight of striking and not have to worry about coming from behind. Then you got Grasso, who's an orthodox striker and BJJ, a grappler fighting out of Logo Gym MMA. And like you said, she has a purple belt. She had in her career in the UFC, she has traded wins and losses in every fight. It's been win, loss, win, loss, win, loss.
Yeah, I saw that.
She can't seem to get on a winning streak or losing streak. She's just 500. All of those fights have gone the distance, except for her submission loss to Tatiana Suarez. She lost by submission. She's going to want to get up close and pressure Barber and test her knee out to see how she is. And then one sneaky thing about Grasso is she has a kickboxing background, which I'm surprised from that type of fighter, because she's going to want to grapple, but she might use that and mix that in with the grapple and get her on the cage. Just like I said, test her knee out, like near right in the knee in that area. See if she can take it. See if it's still bothering her. Wear her down a little bit. But the one thing I found out when I looked into Barber is she still used to just run into her opponent. She just sees her opponent and then runs through him. She does whatever. She just focuses on winning and doesn't take her time and everything. After she got hurt, she changed training camps, and instead of trying to force her will on her opponent, she said she has come out and said she's going to be more patient and then take focus on her striking and then picking and choosing her shots, because she thinks that she can wear Grasso out and then keep her from getting to her game. And with that, I feel like BC Barber's going to win. Even though I think she's going to wear her out, I think it's going to be an easy first round knockout. I think she's going to get her with the power shots. She's known to have the best power shot, the striking in the division. Even with the loss because of the injury, she's going to get back on the winning track, get back into that top 5 status that she should be getting into, because she's 10 right now. I believe she was 7 or 8. Leaning towards the top 5 when she got the injury. Then they dropped her back to 9 or 10. And then now she's looking to get back up and get moving, because she has one of the best chances to match up with the champions right now, with her background and then her capabilities.
I don't know if she's got a shot with Shevchenko right now. I mean, she's good, but come on. I think she's still pretty green. I don't think she's ready, because remember, Shevchenko, before she ever entered the UFC, she was a 17-time Muay Thai and kickboxing world champion. So like, that's a whole other level of striking that I don't think she's quite ready for. Barber's good, and I think maybe in like 5 years she's going to catch up, but
I
don't
give
know.
her 1 or 2 years with her background because
Well, I think it's 5 because of the knee injury. Like that's why I'm giving it more
okay.
time because especially like you just said, she changed training camps and now she's changing her approach. I don't think that was voluntary because especially with fighters, I think the general attitude is if it ain't broke, don't fix it. You know,
Yeah.
so the fact that she's fixing it tells me that I think that knee injury is giving her like lasting issues. And as a result, she's had to change up her game because she can't do the things she used to do anymore, which is interesting because there's been a trend in the training camps. I don't know if you heard of this, but they are starting to spar less and less. Like it's mostly more bag work, pad work, partner
Max
work.
Holloway.
Yeah, Max Holloway, same thing. He like didn't spar almost at
Not at
all.
all.
But it's interesting because I think the problem with that is if you are changing your strategy so much, you need the sparring experience because that's what gives you that live practice with the new strategy. And if she's going to one of these training camps that don't spar a lot, I think that's gonna fuck her up a little bit because she's gonna have to be figuring shit out on the fly, you know.
Yeah, but maybe it's a blessing in disguise that she got hurt
Mm-hmm.
because she was able to change things up because
Mm-hmm.
maybe she goes into on a win streak if she doesn't get hurt, goes in, fights Shevchenko, and then loses because she has that tunnel vision, and she goes
Yeah.
does that and then gets beat. Whereas now she can kind of recoup herself. She gets
Mm-hmm.
healthy, changes the game plan up to where it's more patient,
Mm-hmm.
and she still has that killer instinct, but maybe she doesn't shoot her shot, get
Yeah.
tired, and then lose to Shevchenko. Maybe now she can bag up a few wins with the new game plan, see how
Mm-hmm.
her knee goes. If she could get on the winning streak and the knee's fine, then perfect. Goes into there, and she could go and get kind of a completely different game plan of
Yeah.
attacking, but with angles and shots, and then
Yeah.
not tiring herself out. Just take her shots, move around the cage, kind of like a la Dominic Reyes against
Mm-hmm.
Jones. He
Yeah.
tired out because he was trying to do too much too fast.
Yeah.
But with that space, John Jones couldn't really get his game going
Mm-hmm.
until later on when Reyes kind of gassed out, punching him at that one point in time in the second round, where he
Yeah.
was already up 2-0
Mm-hmm.
going into the third, which allowed Jones to get back into it and win by a controversial decision. She
Mm-hmm.
can kind of do the same thing, move around. She has the power to when she takes connects with shots, she can hurt
Yeah.
Shevchenko, kind of like how Amanda Nunez does. But that's a
Sure.
different fighter, different matchup, but like
Yeah.
in the same situation where she can pick and choose and then just connect and then damage her and get her mind going in all directions.
See, in my opinion, I think if she's gonna have a learning experience from this knee injury, it needs to be in the grappling because she might be able to stand and trade with Shevchenko and maybe even hurt her, but Shevchenko's wrestling and her submission work, I don't think they're even close right now. Like if she goes to the ground, Shevchenko's just going to dominate her for however long she wants, and then eventually Barber's going to make a mistake and she's going to get submitted. So I
Yeah.
think right now, if she has a knee injury, first of all, if you have issues with striking and staying on your feet, you should be working on your ground game because it's how you can get a rest. It's how you can let that knee recover for a minute, especially in these long-term fights. She goes up against Shevchenko. That's a 5-round fight on a knee that's damaged. So she should be working on her grappling stuff, getting that ground game more well-rounded. Because right now, I mean, she can do it, but I don't think it's at the level to be able to challenge someone like Shevchenko, especially in a long-term fight. So I think that should be her focus now, especially particularly I think looking for and defending submissions, I think is a big one because she wrestles and she can get you down, but her plan is more like ground and pound, and she can like problem solve if things get kind of hairy. But man, and Shevchenko's is very similar to like Khabib style because they both do sambo, and that
Yeah.
flavor of sambo is it's very intricate, but it's tough to match unless you also do sambo. It's a very particular way of wrestling and blending in submissions. It's very, very cool.
They actually, speaking of Habib, they had this thing on one of MMA websites that I was just so happened to come across during my research, and it was who'd win if Habib moved up weight classes between him and Colby Covington. Yeah, which at first you're like, Habib, that's easy, but then I look into it and I'm like, Colby Covington has a big wrestling background,
He does, yeah.
and then he has a big gas tank. Plus, he's just like Max Holloway. He's one of those guys that punches a lot and can do that for a full 5 rounds without really getting too tired. He sometimes takes off like a third round, but he can, and then his defense is pretty good too. Like he was able to defend Usman, who is a really good wrestler. Now, I know it's not.
He didn't really try. He didn't really try to do a whole lot of wrestling with Usman. He just wanted to stand and trade.
Yeah.
I think he wanted to knock him out, but
but Usman tried to get him down a couple times. I think it got Covington down once or twice after he broke his jaw, but
that was cool. Yeah.
it happened in the second round. Then he fought the rest of the fight with the broken jaw, and then still went and was unloading, and then had that fight 4 rounds to none until he got rocked in the 5th.
Oh yeah.
Because of the jaw. It's just a matter of time before he got caught with the jaw already down, before he just had to go down, because your jaw's not made to go that far after you break it. But that would be interesting, because like Habib hits, but he hasn't had that power that you expect him to have. He does
his background. I mean, with Khabib's background, he's definitely more of a wrestler. You know what I mean? Like he can strike, but
he wears you down and then gets you with the striking, because you're already getting wear down. But a guy who has that background, it'll be interesting to see how that would go. And then Habib would kind of lose a little bit of that speed moving up in weight class to 170, where he's a little bit heavier. Compared to Covington, who I think doesn't have to cut that much. I feel like he's there. Like I feel like he just looks like he's 170 naturally.
I don't know. I'm not really convinced, because I think we saw this fight already with Khabib and Gaethje. Because I mean, Gaethje and Covington have a very similar resume. I think Covington probably strikes a little bit differently. His wrestling game, his wrestling game has a different flavor to it. But I mean, Khabib was able to problem solve Gaethje. I think he'd be able to problem solve Covington. I didn't really see anything all that special, because I watched the Usman Covington fight.
Yeah,
I mean, I can see why I got knocked the fuck out. You know, like I can see why it happened. I can see why I think Khabib would either knock him out, or more likely I think he'd submit him, because he has the NCAA background. But the thing is, I think he's going to come up against the same issue that Gaethje had, which is NCAA wrestling, fantastic for controlling the guy, not great for finishing, because it's all about pinning, and the rule sets are different. Whereas with the Sambo, you get all the benefits of the NCAA wrestling style, where there's a lot of the same philosophies and a lot of the same strategies are employed, but it blends in the submission game in a very sneaky way that's kind of hard to resist unless you also are trained in that particular way, especially with the things like they have their own like special things like those, the figure 4 leg locks that just kind of take all your options away. So I don't know. I don't see it going all that differently from the Gaethje fight.
I personally do. But I think it would be close, just because the difference between Covington and Gaethje is Gaethje goes for the striking first, and then he uses the wrestling, but he kind of tends to forget it. Whereas Covington, he doesn't forget it unless he's motivated to stand up with the guy because he doesn't like him. I don't think he doesn't like Habib. I think he would just talk, but then when he gets in, he'd be focused to fight him, because him and Usman didn't like each other. Him and Woodley didn't like each other.
Yeah, but I think that's because he's a little racist. I think that's why. I think he's.
But then he fought Robbie Lawler. He didn't talk. He talked, but he used his ground game and used it early and often. And then I think he got off at least 500 punches in that fight.
Oh yeah,
where
big volume.
Volume wise, he gets in volume. Gaethje doesn't get volume in. He has more power, but when you get the volume in, you wear a guy out just the same way. But Gaethje also has had issues with his gas tank at times. Sure. Covington doesn't have an issue. He could go all 5 rounds and then go a little bit more.
Got the endurance, yeah.
Yeah,
I Nurmagomedov would just take his options away because that's what he does whenever he goes up against someone who has high volume. He just does. We're not doing that, and then you can't do anything about it. You're like, God damn it! Like he gets you up against the cage on your ass, then he figure fours your legs. You're like, I can't do a whole lot of striking anymore. You know?
His brother, it's funny. I just looked at his brother just signed a 3-fight deal with Bellator
Oh,
MMA.
that's
His
cool.
brother Uzman
Hmm.
Nagomedov. So
Huh.
so I'm hoping that he is anywhere as compared to Habib
Right.
as anybody else. Because if he is, Bellator just hit the jackpot
Hmm.
with signing him. But now we're moving on to the main event, the reason that we're doing this tonight, which is a welterweight championship matchup between the champion Kamaru Usman and Gilbert Burns. The very interesting thing about this fight is that they're training partners. They're
Hmm.
at the same gym. They both go out and they work together. There's been a little bit of tension, but not too much. Not to where it's like, oh, you're coming after my belt and we're training partners. You get kind of like back in the day with Tito Ortiz and Chuck Liddell.
Hmm.
It was just Gilbert Burns was like, I have to do it. Like I
Yeah.
want that title shot, and you're the champion. And I'm like, there's nothing I can do. I can't just stand there and be like, okay, you do that. I'll just
Right.
hang out at the 1-2 range. Because originally it was supposed to be Edwards who was going to get it, but then with the travel restrictions with COVID being in England, he didn't
Yeah.
get it, and they gave it to Burns. And then in July he got COVID, so that's why Masvidal took his place in July, and then guys ass whooped, and then they finally
Yeah.
rebooked it, so now he can get going. This is very intriguing, and I want to get your takes on the main event.
All right. Yeah, this is an interesting matchup because we got two guys who are really good grapplers, but they're good grapplers in different parts of the grappling kind of arena, right? Like you got Usman. Really, it's his wrestling that's the most impressive. The NCAA Division II wrestler, All American champion. He's got some Brazilian Jiu Jitsu background. Apparently, he's a black belt. I don't know who gave him that black belt, but apparently he has good ground game. You almost never see it though. Like he gets down there and he's very like heavy on top. He's got a lot of good pressure, but he has a preference for ground and pound. You don't see him looking for a lot of submissions. Um, he's definitely a big power striker, but his thing is he's very patient. He waits, he picks his shots. We saw that a lot with Cody Covington or Colby rather. He was really looking to try to overwhelm Usman with a lot of volume and a lot of power, but Usman just kind of waited him out, broke his jaw, and then just kept hammering on him until he chopped him down. So what's interesting is Usman, although he's a champion and he's had a pretty much a perfect record, there was one loss, but that was before he entered the UFC. So since he's come in, he hasn't lost yet. But he is largely a decision fighter. 9 of his victories in the UFC are decision wins, 1 submission win, and 2 wins by KO. So he's definitely got the chin. He's got great impact resistance. He's got a great gas tank. He can go all 5 rounds. He's very comfortable doing that. He's able to maintain composure when he's being hit, which is huge because that was, I think, one thing that kind of screwed up Covington is that whenever he'd throw those big, heavy power strikes and they'd connect, he wasn't getting the kind of response he was expecting. Like, I think a lot of guys, if they got hit like that, they would start backing up. Usman just held his ground. He just kept that center ring and he kept hammering on him. But of course, he's a slow starter and he builds up steam as the fight goes on. And his strategy is essentially just to wear down whoever he's up against. When he stands, he tends to want to, stand and trade. He doesn't get overwhelmed easily, but when he does use his wrestling, it's mostly to, get people up against the cage, the occasional takedown, to get on top and look for that ground and pound game. Apparently, he still has a perfect takedown defense, has not been taken down in his entire career. I'm not sure if that changed with the last fight, but that was the way it was with the Covington fight, and he didn't get taken down there. Now, on the other hand, you got Burns. Apparently, he's a second-degree black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which that's a lot of time and a lot of study. Very, very much a ground guy, 7-time Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu champion, both national and worldwide. Now, he's sort of the opposite. He's a very fast starter. He relies on a lot of fast handwork. He's probably going to look to overwhelm Usman early in the fight because he's only gone 5 rounds one time, and that was against Woodley. So I don't think he has the same kind of endurance that Usman has. So if he's looking for some kind of knockout to happen, he's going to have to make it happen in probably the first or second round. Otherwise, he's going to have a gas tank issue. His hand speed decreases as the fight goes on, but he tries to maintain his striking power, particularly by like kind of swinging wild, especially when he gets real tired. That's one thing I see a lot is he does like these real wild hooks in order to maintain striking power without having to, I guess, use technique as much because that can be taxing on you depending on how you strike. So he's got a great wrestling background, but I think he's gonna have trouble with Usman because, like, when you watch him wrestle, he's pretty decent at like getting the back and getting these advantageous positions, and of course working into the takedown because he's a jiu-jitsu guy. You need that skill set, but Usman's never been taken down, and he's a very strong wrestler. So I think he's gonna have a lot of trouble there, and unfortunately, that's kind of the strategy he needs to use here because I think he is the more well-rounded ground fighter. So if he can get it to the ground, he's in a very good position there. Although most of the time he uses the same sort of jiu-jitsu game where it's very high pressure, top position, but he looks for submissions rather than a ground and pound. Well, I think more often than Usman does. So overall, I would say win by knockout goes to Usman just because of the stats. They fight similar but different. Like I think in terms of power, they're probably fairly evenly matched. It's just, you got Burns who's more quick with the hands and, doesn't have, I don't think, the endurance to go 5 rounds in the same way that Usman does, who's very comfortable doing that. So I think as the fight goes on, the chances of a Burns knockout decrease exponentially. Submission, I think that's Burns' path to victory. If he's going to pull out something amazing, it's going to be by submission because that's the chink in Usman's armor. He's not as good of a ground game guy. And I think with his background and experience, he could definitely be a huge problem, especially if Usman wants to be very heavy pressure top game. The question is, well, how good is Burns' game from his back? Can he find those submissions while Usman is on top trying to like land these big heavy hits and do a ground and pound type situation? And then I think decision, obviously I'm calling it for Usman. And I think it'll probably end up going the distance. I mean, they both have great impact resistance. They both got a chin on them. So, I mean, I don't see Burns getting necessarily knocked out. I think it could happen, like it happened with Cody Covington or Colby Covington, if Usman just wears him down enough. But yeah, I think a decision win by Usman is probably the most likely outcome here.
Yeah, don't let the gas tank issue for Burns fool you because he early in his career he had a completely different game plan in how he fought compared to what it is now. Since he switched things up, he focused a lot on his grapple, and then now he's focusing on his striking a little bit more. But going into this fight, we got Usman. He's an orthodox wrestler who fights out Blackzilian MMA. He's 3-0 in his last fight, 3 fights, of course, dominating Masvidal, edging Covington with that 5th round knockout. And then dominating Tyron Woodley when he won the belt. That was the start of Woodley's fall down the division because he's lost the last 3 to 4 fights. He looks to take his opponents down, wear them out. A very underrated part of his game is his stance change. He likes to change his stance here and there to get to his opponent because he might start out standing left, and then he'll switch over to the right when his opponent gets comfortable with the striking, just to get to him, and then have him have to switch things up. And then once he goes do that, he'll switch it back, and then he'll just keep doing that. So he keeps his opponent on edge, and then he has, just like you said, he has one of the best takedown defenses game in the business. Hasn't been taken down. He keeps his composure. Like he prides himself on not getting taken down by these wrestlers and grapplers. And we hear about Usman having that knockout power, but that for some reason that's still his underrated game. No one talks about it because they talk about his takedown defense and his stance changing because that's what he does all the time. But then you got Burns. He's an orthodox BJJ grappler, black belt, also fighting out Black Zone MMA for this. I believe for this fight, Usman changed camps actually, and now he went from Florida because they trained out, I think, Coconut Creek, Florida, and now he's training in Colorado with I think Justin Gagey.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I think they trained together before Gage's fight with Habib. They showed Gagey and Usman.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
wrestling around for like a minute and a half, and then which was really cool. He changed his whole thing just for this. I don't know if he's staying there or for good or if it's just for this fight, but he did that. But Burns started out as a grappler and then added kickboxing coach Henry Hooft to his team before moving up to welterweight. Like he's been known to go between welterweight and lightweight. He's bounced in and around for the past 5 years. And once he added him to it, they focused him on just moving back up, get some of that endurance back because he doesn't have to move around as much going up against those fast lightweights. And then he starts striking better now and getting that going. And that's why I said don't let that gas tank fool you, because he was doing too much grappling with these lightweights, and that's why he was gassing out. Now he's back in the welterweight where he can kind of work on his endurance and strike more and then grapple less and use that as like a secondary thing so that he can last. That's why, like, granted, Woodley has been on the down, but he completely dominated that fight.
Oh yeah,
and a pretty good part of his game is he picks and chooses his shots. He doesn't just go for the kill right away. He punches you, waits a second, punches you. It's like a game plan for him where he wants to be as precise and take his time because he knows that if he does that, he won't gas out. It's like he's kind of being careful of that because he knew that what happened in the past to him where he gas out and whatnot. And where I think that, just like you said, where it could end in his favor is if he could do that and then it doesn't have to shoot him down, but if he can just use his weight to get him down, not necessarily like a takedown, but like get behind him and then pull him down. But a thing that I think that Usman's going to use in this fight that might be the difference maker is he's going to get Burns towards the cage. He's going to hold him at the cage, clinch him, and then just keep kneeing him, whatnot, waste time, try and wear him out early. That's what he did in the Masvidal fight. He just kept on clinching him, kneeing him, kept him from getting that explosion out of offense. Which kind of wore him down, and then he was basically null and void for the rest of the fight because he was so wear down from being clinched on the cage, because like that's a big part of Usman's game. But I think that Burns might think that because they've trained together, so I think he's going to come out and try and get him down right away, and just do the complete opposite. He's going to try and wear him down on the mat. Or get him hit early, and get him the thing. And I think the perfect game plan for Burns is to go at Usman's stomach and his side, not necessarily his head. And then get him with the leg kicks. Burns' leg kicks are a good part of his game plan in his fights now. He likes to use those kicks. If he can do that, get the stomach, he can wear him down and then keep him from not being able to defend because he's already wearing down the bottom of his body to where he can't get into that takedown stance of defending it. That would be his big chance at winning this fight. I see this going the distance like you do. I think it's going to come down to the last round. And to me, it's whether Burns has enough in the tank at that point or if Usman is already like pressing his will on. I think it's I have it as Burns winning this 3-2 by split decision, but I could see this going complete opposite way. It all depends on the gas tank of Burns in this fight, because fighting Usman is completely different than fighting Woodley, because Woodley has, for some reason, has been too patient in his fights, whereas Usman will be a little more aggressive, and he won't be as willing to get taken down or get hit as Woodley was. But for some reason, I feel like because he knows Usman and he knows his game so much, that he might add a little bit something to it. I don't know what it is yet, but I feel like he's going to add something to his game plan, because Usman's just going to go in there and be like, oh, I know Burns, and because I trained with him, I'm just going to go do this. I'm going to wear him out. But you could see Burns go in there and just go right away, go boom, go striking and go right at him right early. But this is going to be a really interesting fight, and has the potential to be fight of the year. It has the potential to be that, if both guys can be on their best game plan going into this.
Right. So, I mean, if I were Burns, I would try to make Usman as uncomfortable as possible for the whole fight. That's going to be his strategy, but I think Usman kind of knows that, like that's the thing. When you fight with someone long enough, you pick up on their tendencies and you get into a rhythm. And even when you guys like fight in different camps or whatever, and you're apart for a while, once you kind of establish your style, it's real hard to change it completely. So I think Burns is going to go in there with a lot of some of the older habits. And I think he's going to think, maybe if I can get Usman on the ground quickly, then I can work. And I think Usman's going to be like, all right, well, that's the one thing I don't want him to do. And unfortunately, I think that's going to get Burns in a sticky situation with the wrestling, because while he's got great ground game with the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it's like wrestling for a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guy is a tool to get the guy to the ground. It's not like as refined and fleshed out as an NCAA Division II wrestler, right? And I think if he tries to match wrestling for wrestling against Usman, he's going to have a hard time. And there's a reason he hasn't been taken down in his whole career. He's a very strong wrestler. So I don't know. I think if he's not strategic about it, he's going to get into a lot of trouble. But yeah, that first 2 rounds, that's his opportunity to start that cycle of, let me get Usman kind of off balance and in an uncomfortable situation. But if Usman is able to maintain his composure, keep the wrestling on, tire out Burns, I think that window closes very quickly, and then he's up against the 8 ball for the rest of the fight.
Yeah, just like I said before, what I think Burns should do is get those leg kicks going early, because you know how Usman likes to change his stance.
Yeah.
If he can start kicking him early and often on the one leg and get him to change stance, then he'll be leaning back on the leg that was already taking damage, and then he could attack the other leg. And because he's constantly moving his legs back and forth to change his stance, his legs are going to feel those later on in that fight. He's going to want to know that this fight's going to last all 5 rounds. That's going to be his thought process right from the get-go. This is going to last 5 rounds. So if he can get to him early with those leg kicks on both legs, and while he's moving, that's going to benefit him later on in rounds 3, 4, and 5, where maybe he can wait to do the takedowns and then get him then when he's weak in the legs, because he's already damaged those legs. And it's not the same thing, because McGregor sucks with his takedown defense, because he doesn't do anything. But you saw a guy like Poirier, who's not known for his leg kicks, go for it, and he did a lot of damage to McGregor there, because he couldn't stand on it within a round. Usman's going to be able to handle those leg kicks more than McGregor, but as the fight goes on in rounds 3, 4, and 5, he's going to feel those. They're going to slow him down. He's not going to be able to move at the pace that he's going to want to. So I feel like if he can do that, he's going to be better suited in the later rounds where we know it's going to go. But if he gets away from that and he tries and strike and do power striking early and going for the takedowns a lot early on, it's not going to end well. He could get knocked out that way because
Yeah.
he's focusing too much on one thing. So it could go either way. It depends on the game plan that Burns goes into. I'm pretty sure Usman. I know what Usman's going to do. He's going to stick to it, and he's going to be ready. It's just depending on what Burns does is the question in this fight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this is, where it's really important that you have a good coach and that you listen to your coach.
Yeah.
Because I think that's what happened to Covington. I remember in like the third round, his coach was like, "All right, now I need you to wrestle." There was no wrestling happening at all. He just went right back to standing and trading. And his mom's like, "That works for me."
he was up 3 rounds to none, or no, I think it was 2 rounds to 1. Then he won round 4, so he was up 3-1, and then it's like, just run around, act like you're getting chased, and don't get caught, because don't be Chair Sonnen against Anderson Silva, where you had him dead to rights, and all you had to do was do somersaults for 5 minutes, and then you win the title. And then he completely got baited into what Silva wanted, just like Covington got baited into what Usman wanted.
Right.
And because of that, those grudges.
Right. So
I
mean, I think it's Burns is something to prove now. So what I'm worried about is, it's kind of like the Paulo Costa Adesanya situation too. Like, he's got a vision of what victory looks like, and he's not going to accept anything else. Yeah. And if that vision includes a knockout, I mean, I don't think it's in the cards for you, buddy. I think you got to, make a good game plan with your coach, let your coach observe the fight and follow his advice, and, set your ego aside. And, you might not win by the knockout, but if you play smart and you have a good strategy, he has a path to victory.
Yeah. No, geez. And of course, you speak Paulo Costa, his consolation prize for losing that fight is now he gets to fight first Forrest Whitaker, which is going to be really bad with how he's been fighting lately. And he's going to be pissed because he was supposed to have Adesanya, and because he won't beat Cannonier, but because Adesanya is fighting for the light heavyweight title against Janovic next month, he's not going to get that title shot, and then we don't know what's going to happen with that belt if, say, Adesanya wins, because they're saying that this one is going to be after. So you could have an idea where if Adesanya somehow loses, then you can be like, okay, the winner of this, Costa Whitaker, would get that number 1 contender shot.
Yeah.
But say Adesanya wins, they could be like, okay, he's dropping the belt, and then they can make that in a title fight between Costa and Whitaker. They could do that. I think that's what they're waiting on. I think they're going to wait on, because I think, is this beginning of March? Is this one, or is it later?
I don't remember.
And then April will be the Costa Whitaker one. So it'd be interesting to see where they go with all these matchups. But speaking of that, I should just bring it up right now. I got the schedule right here. We got this Saturday is UFC 258 Usman Burns. Then in a few weeks we got UFC 259. So it's going to be late March is going to be the 260. But 259 we got Milicic and Nagano. That's going to be a barnstormer right there for the heavyweight title. 260 we got Adesanya and Jovic for the light heavyweight title. And then mixed in with those, we got three title fights on the lower end of the cards. On the co-main events, we got Peter Yan versus Aljamain Sterling for the bantamweight title. We got Amanda Nunes versus Megan Anderson for the women's bantamweight title. That was supposed to be in December, like the Yan Sterling, but due to an unknown injury, it got pushed back. And then we got Volkanovski defending his featherweight title against Brian Ortega in a really good style matchup right there, where I think that could go either way.
Yeah. Interesting. I couldn't find where Megan Anderson. I don't see where she's in the rankings. Is she top 15 or?
The rankings are really weird because Nunes has both belts, and then they only show the rankings for the one division.
They
and
got the bantamweight division lineup right here.
yeah, they just
But
don't have
what's
the other
here?
one. I think the featherweight.
Featherweight. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
they
not
don't
in
have
there.
that. Like I do the rankings, and then every time I look at it, it's like, okay, I'm not going to do that because the only person they have on the list is Nunez. It's
Nunez.
because I think a lot of those fighters fight both divisions.
Mhm.
So it's just a matter of just pick and choose, pick and choose.
I
And
suppose.
then
Yeah.
I'm looking. What I'm looking forward to is waiting to see because they just put it out there that Zhang Shi will be fighting. I think Rose Namajunas.
Oh,
Uh,
nice. That'll be a good one.
Namajunas. They're just waiting until they can go to China to do
Hmm.
the matchup
It's
because
gonna
they
be a
want to.
while.
She hasn't
Mm,
fought since that fight of the year fight
mhm.
against Joanna Johajek last, I think, March.
Something like that.
So it's been almost 4 years since she's fought, but that fight was amazing. I like she's a very underrated fighter where you're not going to hear a lot about it because she's only fought once in the past year,
Mhm.
and then because of all the COVID issues, and then you got to
Mhm.
wait until they go back to a Fight Island to fight. But she's going to want to fight in China, and then I think they want to capitalize on that demographic there of her being the only one of the only fighters from there, and she's the champion now. So they're hoping that they could go there soon and then make a lot of money doing that because she'll bring all the audience there.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, but
That's good.
that is the show tonight. You can follow us on Twitter and YouTube at Cage IQ. That's for Twitter, and then Cage My IQ for YouTube. And then you can turn in. It's going to start next week, most likely. Tune in every Monday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern time to Cage My IQ, where we'll either be previewing a fight card or talking about the weekend news. It depends on where the pay-per-view falls on. On a pay-per-view week, we'll do the predictions, and then on fight night week, we'll do news. And then I am also looking into doing some pre-recorded episodes for the fight night predictions, where I'll likely release them on a Thursday or Friday right before the fight night card, just to give you all you guys a little bit of extra content. So keep a lookout for those. We started that on Friday, and I'm looking to do that a little bit more, so there's more content to come out there. But I'm D-Bake, and then I got Miles here. Keep a lookout for his podcast, the Laugh and Wreck podcast, on SoundCloud and on the Buzz channel. And then keep a lookout for his Twitch project.
Yep.
I believe it's on Tuesday and Thursday.
Yeah, this week it's going to be Thursdays. The topic this week is Thursdays are deep dive, Tuesdays are variety streams. This Thursday it's going to be current events, some articles I found, as well as some related stuff. We're actually talking about like bullshit martial arts and comically bad self-defense and the funny self-defense guru masters. So it'll be something related to this sort of stuff, just in a different part of the industry.
Yep, and then once again, follow us on Twitter and YouTube at Cage IQ and Cage My IQ. Subscribe to both, and then just keep on looking for our content, and then just shoot us a message on Twitter or comment during the show if there's anything you want to see, and then just be part of the show, and then we're looking forward to see you guys next week. Talk to you guys later.
Sounds good. See you guys.